Elliot Blake, a wealthy and self-assured man, was no stranger to challenges. Success came naturally to him, whether in business, love, or the bets his friends often dared him to take. His confidence was unshakable, and he thrived on competition. At a glittering penthouse party in Manhattan, Elliot stood by the balcony, surveying the city's skyline with a glass of bourbon in hand. The hum of laughter and clinking glasses filled the room behind him, but it was the sly voice of his best friend, Mason Gray, that caught his attention. Mason smirked as he swirled the wine in his glass, always the provocateur. "You've conquered the world, Elliot," he began. "The boardroom, the tabloids, every stupid bet I've thrown your way. But I've got a challenge this time that might actually stump you." Elliot arched an eyebrow, intrigued but unimpressed. "Oh? What's the stakes, Mason?" Mason leaned in conspiratorially, his grin widening. "I bet you wouldn't have the nerve to marry a woman who doesn't fall into your usual type, someone who's not dazzled by your charm or your wallet." Elliot chuckled, the sound deep and amused. "Define my usual type," he teased, taking a slow sip of bourbon. "You know, Elliot," Mason gestured broadly. "Glamorous, adoring, the kind who'd laugh at your worst jokes and agree to your every whim. I'm talking about someone independent, strong-willed, someone who won't be swept off her feet by a fancy suit and your winning smile." Elliot's smirk deepened, the thrill of competition lighting up his eyes. "And the prize?" Mason raised his champagne glass, his grin devilish. $1 million, but there's a catch. You have to marry her and stay married for 6 months. Elliot didn't hesitate. "Easy," he said, clinking his glass against Mason's. "Pick the woman, and I'll make it happen." Mason's grin grew wider as he leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. "I already have someone in mind. Her name is Sophia Carter. She's not like anyone you've ever met." Elliot shrugged, confidence radiating off him. To him, it was just another game to win, another deal to close. Little did he know, this challenge would be unlike anything he had ever faced. The restaurant exuded opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the hum of quiet conversation filled the air. Elliot waited at a secluded table, his patience masked by a carefully cultivated air of calm. He had researched Sophia Carter since Mason's introduction, learning about her reputation as a fiercely independent woman with a sharp mind and an unapologetic attitude. When Sophia arrived, the first thing Elliot noticed was her confidence. She walked into the room like she owned it, her understated elegance drawing attention without trying. Her caramel-hued coat fell perfectly over a tailored dress, and her expression was calm yet commanding. "Elliot Blake," she said, taking the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. "I assume you already know who I am." Elliot smiled, extending a hand. "Sophia Carter. A pleasure." She shook his hand briefly, her grip firm but not lingering. "Let's skip the formalities. I know about the bet." For the first time in years, Elliot was caught off guard. He leaned back in his chair, his smile faltering for only a moment before returning. "Mason doesn't know how to keep a secret, does he?" Sophia tilted her head, studying him. "Actually, he was quite discreet. But you? You're predictable. The type of man who treats life like a game. A bet like this fits you too perfectly." Elliot laughed softly, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Fair enough, yet here you are, agreeing to meet me." Sophia's gaze didn't waver. "I have my reasons. Let's just say I'm curious. 6 months may seem short to you, but it's plenty of time for me to accomplish what I need." Her cryptic statement intrigued Elliot more than he cared to admit. "And what do you need, Sophia?" "To prove that even someone like you can't always win," she replied smoothly, taking a sip of her water. "But don't mistake me. I have no intention of losing myself in this arrangement. If we go through with this, I have conditions." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "I keep my independence. I have my career, my friends, my life. This marriage will be in name only. No interference from you, no attempts to control me." Elliot nodded slowly. impressed by her straightforwardness. "And in return?" "I'll be the wife you need for your little bet," Sophia said. "For 6 months I'll play my role. No more, no less. After that, we part ways. No strings attached." Elliot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And what's in it for you?" Sophia's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "You'll find out, eventually." The waiter arrived with their orders, temporarily breaking the tension. As the meal progressed, their conversation shifted to lighter topics. Sophia spoke with intelligence and wit, and Elliot found himself genuinely enjoying her company, a rarity in his world of superficial connections. By the time the evening ended, Elliot realized 2 things. First, Sophia Carter was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Second, this bet was going to be far more challenging and far more interesting than he had anticipated. As they parted ways, Sophia paused at the door, turning to face him one last time. "Remember, Elliot, 6 months, not a day more." Elliot watched her leave, the faintest hint of a smile playing on his lips. For the first time in a long while, he felt the thrill of uncertainty. The wedding was as unemotional as it was extravagant. Held in a pristine city hall, the ceremony had all the markings of a business transaction rather than a union of hearts. Elliot Blake, with his signature charisma and impeccable suit, stood beside Sophia Carter, who looked stunningly poised in a simple yet elegant dress that she had picked herself. No guests, no vows of eternal love, just the signatures on a marriage certificate and a handshake of mutual understanding. When it was done, Elliot turned to Sophia with his trademark grin. "Well, Mrs. Blake, welcome to the next 6 months of your life." Sophia glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Don't get too comfortable, Elliot. I've already started counting down the days." The car ride to Elliot's penthouse was filled with an uncomfortable silence. The sleek black limousine cruised through the bustling streets of Manhattan, the world outside buzzing with life. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. Sophia stared out of the window, her thoughts her own. Elliot, accustomed to being the center of attention, found her silence unsettling. He was used to people fawning over him, eager to engage. Sophia's indifference, however, was a quiet defiance that intrigued and frustrated him in equal measure. When they arrived at the penthouse, Elliot led her inside, gesturing grandly to the luxurious surroundings. "Welcome to your new home," he announced, his voice filled with pride. The penthouse was nothing short of breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an uninterrupted view of the New York skyline. The space was decorated in modern elegance, sleek furniture, sparkling chandeliers, and abstract art that likely cost more than most people's annual salary. It was a place designed to impress, to overwhelm. Sophia, however, took it all in with a calm, measured gaze. "It's beautiful," she said simply, her tone polite but detached. Elliot smirked. "Beautiful? It's a masterpiece, Sophia. This is the pinnacle of luxury, a place where anyone would feel privileged to live." Sophia turned to him, her expression cool. "I'm not here for the view, Elliot. Remember, this is a temporary arrangement. Don't expect me to be dazzled." Her words hung in the air, a subtle challenge. Elliot chuckled, though the sound lacked warmth. "We'll see about that." The first few days of their marriage passed with strained politeness. Sophia set clear boundaries, making it clear that she would not be absorbed into Elliot's world of opulence and control. She refused the expensive wardrobe he ordered for her, choosing instead to wear her own clothes, sharp, practical pieces that reflected her independent spirit. "You're married to one of the wealthiest men in the city," Elliot said one evening, exasperated. "You could at least let me buy you something nice." Sophia didn't look up from the book she was reading. "I don't need your money, Elliot. I've survived just fine without it, and I'll continue to do so." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You know, most people would jump at the chance to live this kind of life." "I'm not most people," Sophia replied, her tone firm but calm. "I'm not here to be impressed by shiny objects or to play the role of your obedient wife." Her words struck a nerve. For the first time, Elliot felt his carefully curated world being questioned. He prided himself on his ability to charm and win over anyone, but Sophia was immune to his usual tactics. It was both infuriating and fascinating. The tension between them grew as their values continued to clash. Elliot was a man who thrived on control, used to bending situations and people to his will. Sophia, however, was unyielding. She maintained her routine, waking early to work on her projects, attending meetings, and refusing to let Elliot's influence seep into her life. One evening, Elliot decided to push back. He arranged a lavish dinner in the penthouse, complete with a private chef and a table set with fine china and crystal. When Sophia arrived, she paused at the sight of the extravagance. "What's all this?" she asked, her arms crossed. "A celebration," Elliot said, his grin confident. "A toast to our new life together." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Our new life is a business deal, Elliot. This isn't necessary." "Indulge me," he replied, pulling out a chair for her. Reluctantly, she sat down. As the courses were served, Elliot attempted to steer the conversation, hoping to charm her into letting her guard down. But Sophia met his every attempt with sharp wit and an unflinching resolve. "Tell me something, Elliot," she said, setting down her glass of wine. "Is this how you win? By throwing money and luxury at people until they give in?" Elliot leaned back in his chair, his smile faltering for a moment. "I don't need to win, Sophia. I've already won." She tilted her head, her gaze piercing. "Have you?" The question lingered in the air, a challenge Elliot couldn't ignore. He realized then that Sophia wasn't someone who could be bought or manipulated. She was playing her own game, and for the first time, Elliot wasn't sure he was in control. As the weeks went on, Elliot tried different tactics to assert his dominance, but each one only strengthened Sophia's resolve. He arranged for her to have a driver and a personal assistant, only for her to politely decline. He sent extravagant gifts to her office, which she returned without a word. Sophia's independence was a constant reminder to Elliot that this marriage, while convenient for the terms of the bet, was anything but simple. She wasn't just resisting him. She was reshaping the rules of engagement. And despite his frustration, Elliot found himself drawn to her. Sophia's strength, her intelligence, and her ability to stand her ground fascinated him in a way he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in his life, he was confronted with someone who wasn't playing by his rules. But Sophia wasn't immune to the tension either. Late at night, as she stared out at the glittering skyline, she couldn't ignore the growing complexity of her feelings. She had entered this arrangement with her own agenda, determined to remain unaffected by Elliot's charm. Yet, his determination and occasional glimpses of vulnerability made her question her resolve. Their marriage of convenience had become a battleground of wills, with both sides refusing to yield. What neither of them realized was that the very battle they fought was bringing them closer, setting the stage for a transformation neither could have predicted. The penthouse, once a symbol of Elliot's dominance and success, had become a battlefield of wills. Every corner of the expansive space seemed to echo with the tension between its two occupants. Sophia Carter was proving to be a challenge far greater than any corporate rival Elliot Blake had ever faced. Elliot paced the living room, his frustration mounting. "Do you ever let anyone in, Sophia?" he asked, his voice carrying both curiosity and exasperation. "Or is the defiance your entire personality?" Sophia, seated by the window with a cup of tea in hand, didn't bother looking at him. Her tone was calm, almost maddeningly so. "I've let people in before, Elliot, but trust is earned, not bought." Her words stung, though he wouldn't admit it. Elliot prided himself on his ability to win over anyone and control any situation. Yet, here was a woman who seemed completely impervious to his wealth and charm. It was a challenge he hadn't anticipated, and it was beginning to gnaw at him. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. Sophia maintained her independence, going about her life as if the penthouse and its luxuries were nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Elliot, meanwhile, found himself increasingly consumed by thoughts of her. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Sophia's indifference struck a nerve he didn't know he had. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Elliot returned to find Sophia in the kitchen. She was cooking, the aroma of something simple and hearty filling the air. It was a stark contrast to the high-end takeout he usually ordered. "You cook?" he asked, leaning against the counter. Sophia glanced at him, her expression neutral. "Sometimes. It's calming." Elliot frowned, watching her. "You know we have a chef on call for this sort of thing." "I prefer to do things myself," she replied, turning back to the stove. "Not everything needs to be outsourced, Elliot." There it was again, that subtle jab at his lifestyle. Elliot opened his mouth to retort but stopped himself. Instead, he watched her in silence, noting the ease with which she moved, the confidence in her every action. For the first time, he saw her not as an opponent or a challenge, but as someone different. Their confrontations grew sharper as Elliot's frustration boiled over. One night, as they sat in the living room, the tension finally snapped. "Why are you so intent on resisting everything?" Elliot demanded, his voice rising. "Do you think I'm the villain in your story?" Sophia met his gaze, her eyes steady and piercing. "Maybe you are, Elliot. Or maybe you're just someone who's never been told no before." Her words cut deeper than he expected. Elliot clenched his fists, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm trying here, Sophia. I'm trying to make this work. But you won't meet me halfway." Sophia set her book down, her expression softening slightly. "And what does halfway mean to you? That I give up who I am to fit into your world? That I become another accessory to your success?" "I never said that," Elliot shot back, though the truth in her words struck him. I don't understand you." Sophia sighed, leaning back in her chair. "That's because you're not used to dealing with people who don't care about your money or your power. I'm not here to play your game, Elliot." Her words lingered in the air, a challenge he didn't know how to meet. Over time, Elliot's perspective began to shift. He found himself watching Sophia more closely, not as an opponent, but as a person. He noticed the way she treated people, with kindness and respect, regardless of their status. He saw the passion she poured into her work, her dedication to causes that didn't serve her own interests. And he realized, much to his surprise, that he admired her. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Elliot decided to break the silence. "Why did you agree to this, Sophia? You're clearly not in it for the money." Sophia glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Let's just say I have my reasons." Elliot frowned. "That's not an answer." She smiled faintly. "It's the only one you're getting for now." Her cryptic response only deepened his curiosity. For the first time in his life, Elliot felt like he wasn't the one in control, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. Sophia, meanwhile, was grappling with her own emotions. She had entered this marriage with a clear purpose, a plan she had carefully crafted. But as she spent more time with Elliot, she began to see glimpses of the man beneath the arrogance. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman, he was someone with his own insecurities, his own struggles. And against her better judgment, she found herself caring. But Sophia couldn't let herself lose focus. She had agreed to this marriage for a reason, and she wasn't about to let her growing feelings for Elliot derail her plans. As the days wore on, the cracks in both their defenses became more apparent. Elliot, once so confident and in control, found himself questioning his own motivations. And Sophia, despite her resolve, began to wonder if her plan was worth the emotional toll it was taking. The penthouse was quiet that evening, the hum of New York City below muted by the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline. Elliot Blake sat in the living room, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand, the amber liquid catching the light. He had spent the day at work distracted by thoughts of Sophia, her resistance, her independence, her defiance. It was a puzzle he couldn't solve, and it consumed him. Sophia entered the room, her presence immediately drawing his attention. She was dressed casually, her hair loosely tied back, but her expression was far from relaxed. There was a weight in her eyes, a heaviness that made Elliot straighten in his seat. "We need to talk," Sophia said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion. Elliot gestured to the chair across from him. "By all means." Sophia didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the window, her arms crossed as she stared out at the glittering city. Elliot watched her, his curiosity piqued but laced with unease. He could tell this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. "Do you ever think about the people you've hurt, Elliot?" she asked, her voice softer now but tinged with bitterness. Elliot frowned, caught off guard by the question. "What are you talking about?" She turned to face him, her eyes blazing with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "I'm talking about the deals you've made, the companies you've crushed, the lives you've destroyed on your way to the top." Elliot set his glass down, leaning forward slightly. "I've made tough decisions, yes. That's business." Sophia let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Business? Is that what you call it? Collateral damage in the name of profit?" Elliot's patience was wearing thin. "What are you trying to say, Sophia? If you have something to tell me, just say it." Sophia stepped closer, her arms still crossed as if holding herself together. "Years ago, you destroyed my father's company." Elliot froze. The words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on him. He opened his mouth to respond, but she wasn't finished. "He was a good man," she continued, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "An honest man who built something from nothing. And you—" She pointed at him, her hand shaking. "You came in with your deals and your lawyers and your greed, and you took it all away." Elliot stood, his heart racing. "Sophia, I don't even know—" "You don't know?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Of course you don't. Because to you, it was just another acquisition, another line on a balance sheet. But to us, it was everything." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Elliot tried to recall the details, the names, the faces, but they all blurred together. There had been so many deals, so many companies he had absorbed or dismantled in his relentless pursuit of success. Sophia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "After you took the company, my father, he tried to start over, but the stress, the shame, it was too much. He had a heart attack, and he didn't survive." Elliot felt the blood drain from his face. He stared at her, unable to find the words to respond. "We lost everything," Sophia continued, her voice now quieter but no less powerful. "The house, the life we knew, even our dignity. And while you were celebrating your latest victory, I was burying my father." Elliot sank back into his chair, his hands gripping the armrests as if to anchor himself. I didn't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course you didn't," Sophia shot back, "because you never bothered to look at the people behind the numbers. You just moved on to the next deal, the next win." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the city below. Elliot felt as if the walls were closing in on him. The weight of Sophia's words was unbearable, and for the first time in his life he felt truly powerless. Sophia moved to stand directly in front of him, her eyes locked on his. "That's why I agreed to this bet, Elliot, not for the money, not for the challenge. I wanted you to see what it feels like to lose, to feel powerless, to face the consequences of your actions." Elliot looked up at her, his expression a mix of guilt, regret, and something else, admiration. Despite everything, he couldn't deny the strength it must have taken for her to confront him like this. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling inadequate but genuine. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. If I had known—" "That's the problem," she interrupted, her tone softer now but still firm. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. But now you do." Elliot stood, closing the distance between them. "Tell me how I can make this right, please." Sophia studied him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. Finally, she stepped back, shaking her head slightly. "You can't make it right, Elliot. My father is gone, and nothing you do will change that." Her words cut deep, but Elliot refused to back down. "I can try," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." Sophia looked at him, her expression unreadable. "We'll see," she said quietly before turning and walking toward her bedroom. Elliot stood alone in the living room, his mind racing. The man who had always prided himself on being in control now felt completely unmoored. But as the weight of his guilt settled over him, so did a sense of purpose. Sophia had been right. He had never cared to know the people his actions affected. But now he couldn't ignore the truth. And for the first time, Elliot Blake was determined to change, not for a bet, not for pride, but for something far more important: redemption. In the silence of the penthouse, he made a promise to himself. He would face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful, and he would prove to Sophia and to himself that he was capable of being a better man. The weight of Sophia's revelation about her family's downfall hung heavily over Elliot in the days that followed. Her words echoed in his mind, forcing him to confront the pain he had caused not just to her, but to so many others. For the first time, Elliot truly saw the far-reaching consequences of his ruthless ambition, a legacy of destruction that had shattered lives, families, and dreams. Elliot knew that words alone would never be enough. He had to act, not just to regain Sophia's trust, but to prove, to himself, to her, and to the world, that he was capable of change. Elliot began by reaching out to the families and businesses that had been hurt by his past actions. It wasn't easy. Many doors were slammed in his face, and his emails often went unanswered. Yet, he persisted. He visited small shops that were barely surviving, knocked on doors in neighborhoods far from the opulence of his world, and offered both apologies and reparations. One of the first families he visited was that of an old competitor whose business he had bought out years ago. When the door opened, Elliot was met with a wary gaze from a middle-aged woman. "Mr. Blake," she said, her tone cold. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," Elliot said sincerely. "I know my actions destroyed your family's business, and I want to make amends." The woman studied him for a long moment before stepping aside to let him in. As they talked, Elliot learned about the struggles her family had faced after their business was taken over. Her husband had passed away a year later from the stress, and her son had dropped out of college to help make ends meet. Elliot listened, his heart heavy with guilt, and offered financial support to help rebuild what he had taken. "I don't know if I can forgive you," the woman said as he stood to leave. "But it's good to see you're finally trying to make things right." Elliot's efforts didn't stop there. He set up a foundation to support small businesses, focusing on those he had impacted directly. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the foundation provided not just financial aid, but also mentorship and resources to help businesses thrive. At work, Elliot implemented new policies to promote ethical practices. He held meetings with his team, openly admitting his mistakes and emphasizing the importance of compassion and fairness in their dealings. His employees, many of whom had only ever known him as a cold, profit-driven leader, were surprised by his transformation. Sophia, meanwhile, watched his efforts cautiously. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he poured himself into every apology, every act of restitution. She wanted to believe that his change was real, but a part of her remained guarded, unsure if it would last. One evening, as Elliot returned from another visit to a family he had wronged, he found Sophia sitting in the living room. She was reading, but her eyes lifted when he walked in. There was something softer in her gaze, something that made his heart ache with hope. "How was it today?" she asked, her tone neutral but curious. "Difficult," Elliot admitted, sitting across from her, "but necessary. Every conversation is a reminder of how much damage I've caused. It's humbling, but I know I have to keep going." Sophia nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's a start," she said simply before returning to her book. Elliot knew it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, and that something was enough to keep him going. Elliot's journey wasn't just about redemption, it was about rediscovery. He began to see the world through a different lens, one that valued connection over competition, people over profits. He found joy in the small moments, helping a struggling entrepreneur find their footing, seeing a family smile as they rebuilt their lives and earning the cautious but growing respect of Sophia. One day he decided to visit Sophia's childhood neighborhood. It was a modest, unassuming place, filled with memories of a simpler time. As he walked the streets, he imagined her as a child, playing in the yards and running through the alleys. He stopped by a community center and made a donation in her father's name, ensuring that it would provide scholarships for underprivileged youth. It was his way of honoring the man he had wronged and supporting the dreams of others like Sophia. Sophia began to notice the depth of Elliot's transformation. He was no longer the arrogant businessman who had entered her life with a careless bet. He was someone who had faced his flaws head-on and was working tirelessly to become better. Slowly, she began to let her guard down. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Sophia broke the silence. "I see what you're doing, Elliot," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I can tell it's not just for show. But I need you to understand something. This isn't about me forgiving you. It's about you becoming someone you can live with, someone who won't make those same mistakes again." Elliot nodded, his expression earnest. "I know, Sophia, and I'm not doing this for praise or forgiveness. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." For the first time, Sophia smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. It was a glimmer of hope, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. Elliot's journey of redemption was far from over, but he was no longer walking it alone. Sophia's cautious acceptance of his efforts gave him the strength to keep going, to prove that he was capable of change. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship began to shift. The walls that had once divided them started to come down, brick by brick. They weren't just two people tied together by a bet anymore. They were two individuals learning to trust, to grow, and to build something new. Elliot knew that he could never undo the harm he had caused, but he also knew that he had the power to create something better. With Sophia by his side, even if tentatively, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, Elliot Blake wasn't chasing a win. He was chasing a future, one built on love, respect, and the promise of redemption. Elliot Blake sat on the edge of the penthouse balcony, the crisp evening air brushing against his face as he gazed out at the glittering city skyline. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deals or profits. His mind was consumed by one thought: Sophia, the woman who had challenged his pride, exposed his flaws, and, against all odds, made him want to be a better man. Inside, Sophia Carter sat curled up on the couch, reading a book. The light from the fireplace flickered against her face, highlighting the quiet strength that had drawn him to her. She was no longer the adversary he had underestimated, nor the pawn in a game he thought he could win. She was the woman he had come to love, though he had yet to tell her. The changes in their relationship were subtle at first. A shared laugh during breakfast, the comfortable silences during their evenings together, the way Sophia's sharp edges softened when Elliot offered small, genuine gestures of care. It was in these quiet moments that something began to shift between them. Sophia had noticed Elliot's efforts. His apologies had been more than just words. He had shown through action that he was trying to atone for his past. The man who once exuded arrogance now approached her with humility and a willingness to listen. Slowly, she found herself letting her guard down, though the scars of their rocky start lingered. One evening, they found themselves sitting together on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between them as they watched an old black-and-white movie. Sophia caught herself laughing at one of Elliot's sarcastic comments and quickly looked away, trying to hide her smile. "What's so funny?" Elliot teased, nudging her playfully. "Nothing," she replied, rolling her eyes but unable to suppress her grin. Elliot leaned back, studying her with a look of genuine curiosity. "You know, I've missed this," he said quietly. "Missed what?" "This," he gestured between them. "Talking to you, making you smile. It's the best part of my day." Sophia glanced at him, surprised by his vulnerability. "You're not the same man I met 6 months ago," she admitted softly. "I hope not," Elliot replied with a faint smile, Because I never want to be that man again. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Elliot continued his redemption journey, but now his efforts weren't just about proving himself to others. They were about showing Sophia that he could be the man she deserved. Sophia, in turn, began to open up about her dreams and fears. She shared stories of her childhood, her love for art, and the struggles she had faced after her father's death. These conversations created a new foundation between them, one built on understanding and mutual respect. One afternoon, Elliot surprised her by taking her to a small art gallery downtown. Sophia's eyes lit up as she wandered through the exhibits, marveling at the vibrant paintings and intricate sculptures. When she turned to thank him, she saw Elliot watching her with a look she couldn't quite define: admiration, affection, and something deeper. "What?" she asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "Nothing," he said with a soft smile. "I just like seeing you happy." It was during a quiet dinner at the penthouse that Elliot decided to take the biggest risk of his life. As they finished their meal, he reached across the table and took Sophia's hand in his. "Sophia," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "When we started this, I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought it was just a game, a bet. But somewhere along the way, you became the most important person in my life." Sophia looked at him, her heart racing as she listened. "I know I've made mistakes, more than I can count, and I know I've hurt you in ways I can never fully make up for. But these past months have shown me what's possible when two people are willing to fight for something real." He stood, pulled a small box from his pocket, and walked around the table to kneel in front of her. "Sophia Carter, I don't deserve you, but I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me. Will you marry me? For real this time?" Sophia's breath caught as she stared at the ring in his hand. It wasn't flashy or extravagant. It was simple, elegant, and exactly her style. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability of a man who had let go of his pride for the sake of love. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Elliot, I'll marry you." Elliot's face broke into a smile of pure joy as he slid the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into an embrace that felt like the beginning of something new, something real. Their second wedding was nothing like the first. Gone were the cold formalities and the superficial glamour. Instead, it was a small, intimate celebration with close friends and family. Sophia wore a simple ivory dress, her smile brighter than any jewel. Elliot stood beside her, his expression one of pride and gratitude. As they exchanged vows, Elliot's voice was steady, but his words were filled with emotion. "Sophia, you've shown me the man I want to be. You've taught me that love isn't about control or power. It's about partnership, respect, and honesty. I promise to spend the rest of my life earning your trust and your love." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears as she replied, "Elliot, you've proven that change is possible and that love can grow even in the unlikeliest of circumstances. I promise to stand by your side, to support you, and to build a life with you that's full of love and purpose." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their friends and family erupted in cheers. But for Elliot and Sophia, the world seemed to fade away as they shared their first kiss as a real couple. In the weeks that followed, Elliot and Sophia settled into their new life together. Their days were filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the occasional challenge, but they faced each obstacle as a team. Elliot continued his work with the foundation, while Sophia pursued her passion for art, finding joy in creating and inspiring others. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, Sophia leaned her head on Elliot's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" she asked with a smile. "All the time," Elliot replied, wrapping his arm around her. "Who would have thought that a ridiculous bet would lead to this?" Sophia laughed softly. "It's not how it started that matters. It's how it's ending." Elliot kissed her forehead, his heart full of gratitude. "And it's only the beginning." The morning sunlight streamed through the large windows of the penthouse, bathing the room in a warm glow. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly sipping her tea. She had been feeling off for days, nausea, fatigue, a vague sense that something was different. She glanced at the calendar on her phone and a thought crossed her mind that made her heart skip a beat. Could it be? She set her tea down, her hands trembling slightly. A mix of excitement and nervousness bubbled within her as she grabbed her coat and headed out the door. This was something she needed to confirm. Later that evening, Elliot returned home after a long day. His tie was loosened and his jacket was slung over his arm, but the weariness in his expression vanished the moment he saw Sophia waiting for him in the living room. She stood there, holding a small envelope, her face alight with a nervous smile. "Hey," she began, her voice soft but steady. "There's something I need to tell you." Elliot's brow furrowed slightly, concern flickering in his eyes as he walked closer. "What is it? Are you okay?" Sophia handed him the envelope, her heart pounding as he opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper, a confirmation from the doctor's office. Elliot stared at it for a moment, his eyes scanning the words. When realization dawned, his face broke into an expression of pure, unfiltered joy. We're having a baby?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Sophia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, Elliot, we're going to be parents." Without hesitation, Elliot pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as a wave of emotion washed over him. He laughed softly, his voice trembling with joy. "This is the best news I've ever heard," he whispered. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and excitement. Elliot threw himself into the role of an expectant father with the same determination he had applied to his business and his journey of redemption. But this time, his efforts were driven by love and a deep desire to provide a stable, nurturing environment for his family. He joined Sophia for every doctor's appointment, marveling at the ultrasound images and asking countless questions to ensure he was prepared. At home, he transformed one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, carefully selecting furniture and decorations that reflected their shared hopes for the future. Sophia, meanwhile, found herself relying on Elliot more than she ever thought she would. His dedication and enthusiasm reassured her, but it was the quiet moments, the way he would place a protective hand on her belly as they watched TV or the way he read parenting books late into the night, that truly touched her heart. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. The walls that had once divided them were gone, replaced by a partnership built on trust, respect, and love. Elliot's transformation extended beyond his personal life. At work, he made a conscious effort to balance his responsibilities as CEO with his commitment to his growing family. He delegated more tasks to his team, ensuring he had time to be present for Sophia during this important chapter of their lives. He also continued his philanthropic efforts, working closely with the foundation he had established to support small businesses and families affected by his past decisions. For Elliot, it was no longer just about redemption. It was about creating a legacy that his child could be proud of. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Elliot turned to Sophia, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think I'm ready for this? To be a father?" Sophia smiled, placing a hand on his. "No one is ever truly ready, Elliot. But you've shown me how much you've changed, how much you care. I have no doubt you'll be an amazing father." Her words filled him with a sense of purpose, and he silently vowed to live up to her faith in him. As the months passed, the anticipation grew. Their love story, once fraught with conflict and challenges, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. They had faced their demons, rebuilt their lives, and now stood on the brink of a new beginning. The evening before Sophia's due date, Elliot surprised her with a quiet dinner at home. The table was set with candles, and the aroma of her favorite dishes filled the air. "To us," Elliot said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, "and to the little one who's about to change our lives forever." Sophia smiled, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "To us," she echoed, "and to second chances." When the day finally came, it was nothing short of miraculous. After hours of labor, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Elliot was by her side the entire time, holding her hand and marveling at her strength. As he held their daughter for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." Sophia watched him with a soft smile, her heart overflowing with love. In that moment, all the pain and hardship they had endured seemed worth it. They had found their way to each other, and now they had created something truly precious. In the months that followed, Elliot and Sophia embraced their new roles as parents. Their days were filled with laughter, late-night feedings, and the quiet joy of watching their daughter grow. Elliot often found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The man he was now, husband, father, advocate, was worlds apart from the man he had been when he first made that reckless bet. He owed his transformation to Sophia, who had challenged him to be better and shown him the true meaning of love. One evening, as they watched their daughter sleep, Elliot turned to Sophia and said, "I never thought I'd be this happy. You've given me everything I didn't know I needed." Sophia smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you've shown me that people can change, that love can grow even in the unlikeliest of circumstances." Together, they looked down at their sleeping child, their hearts full of gratitude and hope. They knew the journey ahead would have its challenges, but they were ready to face them together, as a family. Love has the power to transform even the hardest hearts. Elliot and Sophia's journey is a testament to the strength of forgiveness, the beauty of second chances, and the promise of a brighter future. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales of love, growth, and redemption. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.